going to work. I'm just curious to learn more about what you guys are up to. I don't have any specific questions aside from wanting to find out about the token and just to learn more about the project.
Yeah, great question. So tokens for Asto, the Asto token for ASM, we're looking to launch that this side of Christmas. Probably the phases in terms of launch that you'll see is there'll be a drop coming, and the drop will be the chance to grab an altered state machine frame, which is the container for the brains or the memories that your AI can learn. Alongside that will be the chance to get access to the first drop of the AFA All-Stars, which is the first play-to-earn game that will be launching on the protocol. So these will run kind of like a card pack. So you kind of buy the pack, and then that'll give the opportunity to mint the brain and the players for the game. So once those are out and that drop's kind of kicked off, then the token utility will start to be useful, and that's when we'll start distributing the token. There'll be two ways that people can get a hold of that. The first is that we will be launching a liquidity mining event, so people can come in and show proof of capital and get access to Asto tokens, and you're really going to want those tokens because they're going to help you get to the next stage of intelligence mining and participate in the play-to-earn game mechanics. So that's when the drop will happen again this side of Christmas, but after the first initial content drop, so people can pick up some altered state machine brains. And these ones are the first ever to come out, the Genesis drop, and they're special too. They're going to allow some privileges in the altered state machine protocol for being one of the Genesis participants in that frame drop.
That sounds amazing. What can we do to ensure we get in on the Genesis drop?
Yeah, so stay tuned to Discords and our Twitter channels. But there will be a couple of ways to get in. Obviously, for early supporters and friendly projects like the Fluff World, we'll have a early participant whitelist to get the opportunity to participate in that. And then we'll have the drop mechanics announced pretty shortly. We're just kind of finalizing a few things now with the smart contracts and testing a few things. The ASM drop mechanics are going to be really cool. They're going to be quite novel. Something that hasn't been seen before in the NFT drop space. So we're really looking forward to that. And the content's killer. You've seen kind of a few of the avatars possibly popping up in people's profile pics, but there's a heck of a lot more going on behind the scene. There's going to be some awesome content in the drops.
Very cool. Thank you.
No, I think that actually answers the first question on the Ask Us Anything channel from MZ. Pretty much covers that one.
Yeah, so most important takeouts from there is most important takeouts are there is 2 drops. The first being before, both being before Christmas. The first being your chance to get in on the Genesis drop of Altered State Machine Brains, and the Genesis drop of the AFA All-Stars play-to-earn game. Make sure you get those. They're super special. And then tokens launching shortly after that and giving you some utility straight away with those tokens to help in the ASM protocol, intelligence mining. Get into the text questions again.
Okay, so getting into the machine learning questions, I love this stuff. The intention of the platform to gamify machine learning means that we need to abstract it in a way that's accessible. So if you take the AFA game, for example, the first game that we're producing, it'll be as easy as clicking a button to send it off to the gym. That doesn't mean that you can't abstract some of those more interesting machine learning mechanics out to the users if that works within context of your game or metaverse space. And I really want to see the community come up with interesting ways to do that specifically. But I guess to answer the question, it can be as simple as clicking a button or as technical as you want to make it, depending on the game.
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways to look at this. One is like native altered state machine protocol games that we might release, like the A for All Stars, where we'll build the ability for training to happen as part of that game mechanic, and it'll be as simple as David said, clicking a button. Or if you're a developer, you can start to leverage the protocol to go and create your own user experiences or more complex training environments. The protocol's agnostic to the way things are trained, so it doesn't really care how you do it, which means it's really flexible and it's a really good primitive being applied to lots of different types of training models and use cases and training environments. So the good thing is if you don't know much about AI, you get to click a button, see your guy go into the gym, get a bit smarter, and then see him play and improve and try and challenge others.
So we'll be launching the AFA game with our own cloud-based intelligence mining infrastructure to bootstrap things and get things underway. And then on the roadmap, we're looking to develop decentralized training and gyms. We'll sort of release details on how these will work as we go along, but the team's working on solving some problems around that now.
Yeah, so I think the key thing is that you won't need to necessarily have infrastructure yourself for training, but the second phase of the protocol development is going to allow much more decentralization of mining infrastructure. And our kind of target architecture and the stuff we're playing and testing at the moment is that you'd even just be able to run it on your mobile phone.
Yeah, I think as we all know, Ethereum's moving to proof of stake, so there's going to be a lot of GPU compute resource out there that's not doing anything interesting. Being able to target that for machine learning training is one of our goals.
Yeah, so this kind of notion of proof of intelligence mining, I think you can think of it a little bit like another utility for those soon-to-be stranded GPUs. And in the same way that, infrastructure owners have gone and provided resources to, say, Filecoin, and that's helped propel capital into the space as well as demand for the file token. We think that the opportunity for doing that for intelligence mining exists for ASTO as well. So those same kinds of economic outcomes are possible with the ASTO protocol using this intelligence mining methodology.
So the heat maps is actually a really important piece that we cracked early on. We needed to have a way to inject personality into the training of the machine learning models. Otherwise, you end up with a zero-sum outcome where all of the AI agents train in the same way, find the same basic optimization for the game. So the heat map was chosen because it provides a number of things. It's a great visual representation for users to sort of quickly see at a glance what the stats of their machine learning agent might be. It also provides just a massive number of combinations that any game or machine learning agent can draw from to drive its personality. And it also provides a huge amount of flexibility across the board and can be applied to any use case that we've imagined, at the same time as providing consistency. So we have the concept of a filter that goes over top of the heat map where the the game or where the machine learning agent draws its attributes from or its inputs from. And that filter can be listed in a tag cloud so that other developers can see, okay, A for game, they get strength, for example, or power from this region, and they get speed from this region. I need those two stats in my game, so I'm going to also draw power from a similar region and speed from a similar region, so that you get consistency when you use your agent across multiple games and metaverses, but also it enables them to be flexible. So if you have a chatbot, for example, it doesn't necessarily need those two stats, but you might have a control for something like aggressiveness, where you can look at the tag cloud and you can see, okay, people are getting power and strength and a whole bunch of similar stats from this area. I'm going to take the stat aggressiveness from that same area because it'll give a consistent experience, or talking speed from the speed area, so that people have a consistent experience. So the reason why we chose this format was for both flexibility and also consistency.
Yeah, so it allows this kind of asset portability of brains. And one thing that the researchers have done is try and figure out how can you get like maximum utility out of an ASM frame, because they're going to be quite valuable. And as they learn more and more skills, typically what you'll see in machine learning is that agents become very good at a task. But then when they encounter a new task, they're not so great at it. And this model allows us to have portability of skills across tasks, which is a really important thing and a key part of the patent innovation that's gone into the research behind altered state machine. There's a couple more follow-ups on this question too, which was, will you train the model when the data is either low or non-existent, or how will you train the model when the data is low or non-existent? Great question, and the answer to that is you don't need data to train certain kinds of ASMs. So in the case of the AFA All-Stars ASM model, or generically applied to the gamified intelligence frame model, you can learn through experience. And so you can put your agent in either a real-time environment, playing a game, or a hyper-time environment, the gym, and they can learn by just playing. No data is needed. And this is really important because it means that agents can start to do all sorts of tasks with low or no data availability, which means they can be applied immediately to a whole bunch of use cases, even if you don't have big data vaults available to train them on, or new environments where the data doesn't exist for them to learn about. They can learn by experience. And then just to follow up on that one, what happens when you can't train a model on experience and only gym training and gym training isn't an option? I think that'll come down to developers providing solutions. Remember, altered state machines are generic primitive for anyone to come up with a use case for ownership of an intelligence agent, or these personality heat maps or other kinds of maps. Could be safety parameters in a DeFi protocol or something like that. So we don't define all of these things. Part of the governance of the DAO is that people can propose new standards and the community can adopt those standards. And then those standards can be used for lots of different kinds of training environments. But for ones that we launch as kind of ASM official, we'll make those things easy. It will either provide data to train on, or we'll provide a hyper time experience training gym for.
And I think that kind of goes to answering the next question that they had, which was what were the alternatives for heat maps? As Aaron was saying, that we'll have an RFC process for proposing new frame specs to the DAO, and the DAO will vote on those And we've already thought of a bunch of different specs that can be applied to DeFi and other use cases where the frame spec might be slightly different from the gamification of AI frame spec.
Yeah, and alongside that, the protocol's designed to be chain agnostic. The DAO will exist on, or the token exists on Ethereum mainnet, and the main smart contracts for the DAO exist on there, but we're already developing multi-chain assets for ASM protocol and even in cross-chain DAO governance. So we'll be accepting proposals to the DAO for extending ASM into other chain environments as well. We've got two hands up as well.
Hey, it was a couple of things. You may have sort of answered it. I was wondering what the kind of range of skills and abilities there are that can be learned with ASM. You mentioned some things, but I was wondering, what's the range, or is there a range? Is it as much as your imagination can stretch to? What's the scope of it? I think it's fascinating, the whole machine learning piece.
Yeah, it's definitely as far as your imagination can go, because ASM protocol cares about two things. It cares about proofs of ownership of an artificial intelligence agent through an NFT, and it cares about injection of personality traits into NFTs to affect the way that an agent learns about an environment or a task. So anything you can think of that can be automated through an agent or enhanced through an agent or made richer in an experience through an agent can be done can be kind of combined with the ASM protocol. It's literally limitless.
Got it. And so, for instance, and this may be stretching it. For instance, if someone has an unusual ability with language, for instance, either ability to ask questions or ability to produce language in certain ways, is that the sort of thing that that ASM could train an agent in, so that it can replicate that kind of questioning skill and response skill, or is that a bridge too far?
No, I mean, I think anything you have data for and there is a viable model to apply to could be used. And we think, we're talking to companies around this notion of, the intelligent chatbots and those kinds of things. And those are things you can do today. Like, they're not novel things. But the thing that's novel is that we can start to introduce the same kinds of mechanics which apply to protocols in the blockchain space to the agents. So now you could have a Decentraland help bot owned by the Decentraland governance. And that's something that's new. So it's not just the task that this doesn't provide necessarily more artificial intelligence. It provides more control and ownership and monetization of artificial intelligence. So when we kind of push out the research in the protocol, it'll be about how to connect intelligence, and there's heaps of creativity around how intelligence is kind of building out, but how we can connect it to ownership and economic things. And that's what makes ASM special, is it doesn't matter, people could invent 10 things in the future, 100 things in the future for tasks that AIs are good at. ASM will be good at making those things ownable by tokenized mechanics.
Got it. That's very cool.
Thank you.
There we go. Technical stuff, eh? Gets me every time. Hey guys, it looks really interesting.
Hey,
I've been following this for a little while. Aaron, how are you? Look, I just wanted to understand sort of the security mechanics around ASM. Is there any way that someone could tap into an ASM brain and sort of somehow take the ownership from someone else?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the ASM protocol is about the proofs of ownership, right? And the way that we do this is kind of like a two-factor authentication. So the game, say like in a game environment like AFA, the way a memory is saved when it comes through a training experience or playing experience requires your NFT to sign it, and it requires the training environment to sign it. And if it doesn't have both of those signatures, then it's not a valid brain for that protocol. So you could potentially like try and fork some brains and use that intelligence somewhere, but it wouldn't be recognized as being official for those environments. And so you get the ability to protect your investment in learning and capital in that environment, because the application checks to see whether it signed those outputs or not. And the other option is, if it's not necessary for the agent model to be public, and in some cases you want it to be public because, let's say, it's the intelligence for providing an oracle for a DeFi protocol, well, you might want the community to see exactly how that thing works, because part of the beauty of this kind of agent mechanic is that you can kind of make these provable AI oracles, right, that people can independently verify and inspect. But in some cases you might not. And so in that case, you can encrypt the agent itself and have that only visible to the person who owns the key to that account, but provable that it was signed by the protocol as a valid ASM agent.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's good. So it's sort of obviously a two-way signature, allowing not only just in the environment, but also the person that has the proof of ownership as well. That's right. Okay.
And a related question to that in the text, I might as well cover it off since it's here, is around the patent. So that's one of the inventions that's described in the patenting process. And the reason we've gone through that process is to primarily, even though this is an open source DAO first project, we want to make sure that this protocol has the ability to benefit from those innovations. And so the intention of the patent is to allow freedom to operate. That is, that someone else can't come and patent something and say that this protocol is infringing on it. And also to empower this protocol to, and this DAO to enforce the use of the ASTO protocol when it comes to using these methods for proof of ownership and for these personality injections. So that's the kind of strategy around the patent, I guess.
Awesome, guys. Capture that market, and yeah, you guys will fly. Well done.
Yeah, we all will.
Thanks, Ray.
Hey, thanks. I'll ask the two questions and then I'll leave you guys to it. The first one is, you mentioned the possibility of owning a stadium. Owning land, owning stadium seems like a really good move, and I would imagine that's a move that happens very quickly when things first open up. My first question is, how would we go about that, about acquiring a stadium or other pieces of real estate or property within the particular metaverse? And then the other question was, how can we best support the project going forward?
Yeah, so the how is a good one. So there'll be a couple of mechanics for that. People will be able to purchase those stadiums in a minting event. You may also win them or kind of be surprised by them in a minting event. And you may be able to win them in playing the AFA game or other games in the ecosystem. So all of the options around kind of broadening community participation and providing chance for everyone, even if you're not a whale, to have the opportunity to grab them, will be available. And each stadium will be an NFT. So once you've got it, it'll be tradable and connectable to other things in the metaverse as well.
Guys, my question's in regard to the processing power and the level of the neural network, how would you guys kind of integrate that for deep learning? Because like something like Google, for example, has a large processing power for AI for such a particular like task. How would you guys like kind of break that down in terms of processing power? Like I know that you guys are trying to get potentially miners from Ethereum to join, but with particular tasks, wouldn't you require like a very large processing power?
Yeah,
Okay.
so you're right. So particular tasks require different types of training environments. For the AFIG game, we're using Open Neural Network Exchange, but you could imagine different scenarios using that require a lot more compute power. And the protocol being agnostic to what kind of training method is kind of the point here. You can connect in the required processing power for your environment that you need. So it's a very broad question that I think with AFA as an example, that processing power can be as little or as big as you want it to be. So as Aaron mentioned earlier, you could use a mobile phone potentially later down the track, or if you want to do it in super hyper time, you could use some Google Cloud services to do that training. And I think it needs to be like that to kind of democratize the protocol to make it available for everyone.
Yeah, I think the important part is that the DAO will allow proposals, these RFCs, to come in to create new frame standards as well as new protocol integrations from whatever kind of training environment that exists out there. If there is a good deep learning cloud, Google Cloud use case, then that should be proposed to the DAO with a standard that could be adopted by the DAO, and then that'll go into its own frame production economy linked to the ASTO protocol. So we got these kind of layers of different kinds of intelligence that can be added to the protocol over time. We're bootstrapping that by showing one type of environment that is very flexible and can be used across a lot of different use cases, and we'll make some of those use cases to show everyone how it all comes together. But once that's happened, the whole broader intelligence community can start to come in, make proposals and innovate on top of it.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
It's to follow up on that last question. So Ethereum will be moving to proof of stake eventually. So what do you plan to do when there won't be a lot of miners?
Yeah, so we don't rely on any mining infrastructure currently for our protocol or for the AFA game. And the intelligence mining that happens in AFA, it happens off-chain. So none of the mechanics rely on any kind of proof of work system right now or in the future. What we were suggesting is that if there are a whole bunch of GPUs that are currently mining on Ethereum, and when Ethereum moves to proof of stake have no utility on Ethereum, people could organize intelligence mining clouds to train AFA or agents or other kinds of altered state machine agents in as another way to use that sunk capital. And we think that that'll be a very good use case for spare GPU capacity after mining becomes not a thing. So there's no direct interaction between proof of work and the AFA protocol outside of the fact that currently, the Ethereum network where the token and DAO and stuff are based uses proof of work. That's not a required ingredient for the AFA or the ASTO protocol. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yes, it did.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, and we might stay a little bit longer since we started a little bit later, but maybe I can fire through a couple of these quickly. So can we train our fluff to lease our JADU, lease out our JADU jetpacks? Sure, why not? I mean, the idea is that the training models are flexible, and we definitely want to connect them to DeFi protocols as well, which is I mentioned earlier with InterDAO, and they'll be providing mechanics for leasing out NFT assets. So we think there'll be a good market for intelligent DeFi agents that are controlled by protocols or protocol DAOs. A whole bunch of use cases where that could be really interesting mix to the way that DeFi governance works, and a lot of the things that happen off-chain now and kind of aren't transparent to those protocols. Liquidation bots, for example, could be brought into DAO governance through the ASM protocol. The next one's a long question, but it's a good one because I think it's an interesting ASM use case. So the question reads, hypothetically, if I owned a digital media company in Southeast Asia which had a programmatic advertising marketplace with more than 80 million active monthly users and collecting more than 100 million data events a day based on non-logged in user activity, could I, hypothetically, create an NFT for each unique user, like an identification-based NFT, have that NFT talk to an oracle of sorts, look at the data events, and created contextual audience segments for each unique user. So when it comes time to serve an ad to that user, the NFT would be completely up to date with relevant data. Yeah, technically you could, and hypothetically you could. I think advertising in general is a very interesting opportunity for altered state machine. And if you have access to those assets, what I would do is maybe look at how you can turn the model for advertising and personalization on its head. That is, at the moment, it's quite an exploitative model. And we say that, the father of 1,000 ICOs is the meme of owning your own data and monetizing your own data. But actually, what we find is that most people are too lazy to become their own data broker. So how can you kind of own your own data and monetize your own data without having to become your own data broker? Well, the altered state machine has an interesting opportunity for those with data assets and audiences in that you could create an ASM agent which is owned by the user, like this digital identity, a digital twin, if you will, of that user, and gives them some control and power over how that's monetized, but do that in a cooperative way. So you provide this data to help train it, and that ASM becomes the automated data broker for that user. So instead of having one generic API for people's preferences to be aggregated from, you could have user-specific APIs that are owned by their agent and monetized by their agent, and they can train and probably put much more personal data into and much more accurate data into because they own it, because it's not giving it to some corporation. And so you could end up with a very good targeted advertising agent that is owned by the user or co-owned by a data asset owner or an advertising API owner, so that that user genuinely gets to experience control, but at the same time the advertisers get super or hyper-personalized information from that person's individual data broker. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity for the ASM protocol to change the way advertising marketing works, and also fulfill that goal or that kind of meme around owning your own data in the blockchain space. Yeah, we can answer a quick one, which was the realistic rough yield per day in dollars for an NFT trained to work 24/7. Yeah, ASM slavery, it's going to be an interesting thing. But if you think about the world, like automation is kind of the inevitable outcome of pretty much every task. Laziness is the mother of all invention. And so humans love automation. And that yield could be whatever. It really depends on the effort that goes into training the ASM and the task that it is put to, whether that's, farming inside of the AFA game. We think about that in layers. Like, we have these kind of play-to-earn games like Axie right now where you can make good money by playing those games. But what if you didn't have to play them? You could have whole teams that are playing them that are automated agents. And then what if you had an ASM manager that managed those teams? And so it was kind of doing that management layer for you. So you kind of build up all of these kind of layers of agents over time as well. So the potential is whatever, and it depends on the task that you apply it to. If it's a really good agent for trading, on DeFi, well, how much money could that earn if it was super good and people are investing capital in it as an NFT in a decentralized way, a decentralized quant fund, basically. There's all these kind of opportunities for agents to do interesting tasks that connect to money. And so the world's your oyster, really.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, I just had a question on the AFA game. So one, like, say I trained the best AI, and I'm assuming there'll be some leaderboard that would show that I'm probably the best player in the game. Would I just sell, like, if someone wanted to buy that from me, would I just sell the AI to them? And two, do the characters themselves, like the actual, graphic generated characters, do their graphics or their attributes play any part in how the game is played? Or are they just sort of for clout and, the rarer ones are, more sought after?
Well, the AFA game, specifically, the character models are just visual representations, so they're just a skin, effectively. And the frame NFT and the form, the skin, they exist separately from each other, so you can kind of clip them in and out. So if you do train a shit-hot AFA All-Star who's winning all the games, and you want to trade that, but you want to keep your really cool Devil Ghost skin that Carmen's got up on her profile right now, then you can unclip those two and sell the AI separately.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also there's a unreleased mechanic which we'll talk about maybe in a later AMA when we release the AFA game mechanics, which will allow you to take advantage of having created or trained a very good player without having to sell that player. So we'll talk more about that later, but you'll be able to, essentially, if you create a really good player, you'll be able to earn a very good yield from that without having to sell it, but by allowing other people to take advantage of some of the progress you've made. That's a bit cryptic, but you're going to want to own one of the Genesis characters, AFA frames, and you're going to want to train it and let it be good because it's going to be highly sought after asset.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I've got one from Wiki. He's got a bunch here, but I'll sort of cherry pick some of them. The first one was, does ASM training require visual mechanics? For example, if someone wants to use 2D NFT or an NFT with no arms or legs to be trained in soccer, can ASM training work with that? Yes. So it's up to the designer of the game to decide what mechanics are exposed. For the example of AFA, the models will be interoperable. So whether you've got a floaty ghost dude or he's on roller skates, he will perform exactly the same as a guy running around on his feet. You can think of different scenarios where the model or the skin will influence the output for different games like RPGs or FPS or something like that. But for the A, for example, we'll just keep them sort of all the same across the board.
Maybe. I've got some ideas about how platforms could play a role in mechanics, particularly if we kind of go up the tree of rare stadiums and start to introduce some interesting physics in those stadiums.
Cool. Yeah, we have played around with it like this. We've played around with a size mechanic, which produces some really interesting results. One of those results is actually really cool. So the bigger, slower agents have tended towards defensive positions on their own, which is really cool, sort of emergent behavior from those guys. And the smaller, faster guys tend to take up sort of striker positions in the game. And that's those sorts of emergent mechanics that I sort of nerd out on and love to see. So the more of that sort of stuff we can introduce, the better, in my opinion.
I think some of these we've answered. I'm just kind of scanning them now. Interoperability, I think we have talked about that. Revenue model, talked a little bit about that, but we'll release some more details of the papers coming shortly. Decentralized storage for training, what's the average download processing speed? Assuming that that's a good question. The files aren't huge, so it doesn't take long to load them up into an environment for AFA. There might be other use cases in the future that have bigger agent files, which might have some bandwidth constraints. But right now, all the models that we're working with are relatively small files, so that's not been a concern.
You don't have to download the whole data set.
No.
It's just the neural network, which is relatively small.
Wimbley's given a question, understand the upside a bit more, assuming 12 months from now ASM has a market cap of 20 billion. How did ASM achieve that? Look, I think ultimately that comes down to a couple of things. One, community. So every project's success in this space is driven by how the community gets behind it. Two is applications. So we'll be building some pretty interesting ones. You could imagine something like AFA by itself being a very big play-to-earn game. It's an interesting subject matter. The mechanics are really interesting. The economics of the model are really interesting. So I think just kind of having some all-star applications that come off the protocol will help with that. And then, adding to that because it's open and the types of use cases that ASM agents can do are widely varied, I think you can think about the economics a little bit more like how you think about Chainlink, because Chainlink has some very simple primitives about proofs in oracles, and what they've done very cleverly is to take those simple primitives and apply them to different data sets and therefore a multitude of different applications. And so ASM has this ability as well, because it's such a clever, simple, generic primitive that can be applied across lots of different use cases. People can, drive interactions with a multitude of applications in the same way. So if we're successful, we'll kind of emulate that type of roadmap where we provide these examples and SDKs for the community to go and take and turn into interesting applications. And so that would be kind of the way I'd love to see this roll out.
Go on here. Will AFA be playable by organic intelligence humans? I love that question. Honestly, you wouldn't want to play against these guys. They will thrash you. But we've got, there's so many use cases for sort of companion agents to exist within games where organic intelligence plays. The ones that really get me excited is sort of metaverse and MMO environments where you've got a much richer world of agents acting autonomously when you log off or as owned by a guild in the game, or a whole bunch of other NPC sort of scenarios that increase the richness of the world and make it more lively. So those are the use cases I'm really looking forward to later down the track.
Yeah, these kind of companion use cases I think will be really interesting. You think of most metaverse spaces now, they're actually pretty dull environments compared to, say, traditional AAA titles and MMOs, and the reason for that is that most of the participants in those worlds are organic intelligence. So unless something is actually happening in the space, it can be quite dull. But you don't want to give up the metaverse mechanics, which is that assets inside of there can be owned and traded and, community governed or whatever it happens to be. So what ASM does is it allows us to take the notion of an NPC and add that to a metaverse space owned by users, owned by DAOs, owned by protocols, and add that richness back into those environments that you might be used to in the regular game space, but allow that community creation model where this quest helper or a mini game or whatever it happens to be is actually an ASM agent playing in that environment as an intelligent NPC. Got a question. How does it relate to other centrality ecosystem projects and the DAO participation based on the ASTO token? Yeah, really good question. So DAO participation is ASTO. You need ASTO to participate in the DAO, and that will be in the economic mechanics of the DAO. That'll be in the governance of new frame standards, of new incentive mechanics, of the new integrations or use cases. All those kinds of things will be governed by the DAO itself. Even things like the economics around frame production and frame mining, all of that will be controlled through the ASTO token. And then we're definitely already collaborating with other ecosystem projects. You know that Non-Fungible Labs, who produce Fluffs, is also a shareholder in the Altered State Machine. We've got, as we roll out the mechanics around ASMs, some of them are going to lend themselves to working on chains that are not Ethereum's layer 1 because of the types of interactions and also the cost of those interactions. So we're already looking at targeting potentially SensNet for some of those use cases. With its Ethereum bridge, it's a very good environment for protocol interactions that require low gas fees, for example, or enhanced user permissions or user experience around gaming and those kinds of things. So there'll be lots of opportunities for us to collaborate across the ecosystem.
Got one here from VR Gang. How does the ASM brain develop these personality traits? Are they learned from the human owner? This is a great question. So for the frame spec we're launching with, the one that we're using for gamification of AI, these will be completely randomly generated so that we get a real sort of vast and dynamic sea of different personalities to start smashing this machine learning environment and coming up with interesting ways to solve or optimize. We've discussed, and I think there is really really cool use cases for adaptive personality frames, or a frame spec that has an adaptive heat map. And one of those ones is to learn from supervised training from a human owner. And I think there's some really awesome use cases that could use that frame spec.
Yeah, and to be clear, the first frame spec is personalities are produced randomly. So how do you get one that that corresponds to your personality? You need to probably mine one, or you need ASTO for, or you need to trade for one. another frame spec that will come across after this that David mentioned. The adaptive frame spec will allow you to, modify the inputs to the personality in this kind of companion learning mode, or even in a more direct governance mode. So, say from a DAO, deciding on the parameters. So those different frame specs are in the roadmap to be voted on and introduced it after the first ones come out.
It's on here, CTC0411. Are you sure you're
Are you an agent?
You're an agent. Do we think people will be able to have full-time jobs around the ASM protocol? That's a really good question, and I can't imagine why not. I would love to see this in the future. Obviously, I can't predict that right now, but it's going to be a really rich and full ecosystem with a lot of different use cases coming off the back of it. And a lot of people are already sort of merging into that space in the play-to-earn space, where it is becoming a full-time job. So I can see potentially that happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities, creating content for the community, training your assets up and putting them to work, helping, in different roles in the community in terms of content moderation or community building or all those kinds of things. So many opportunities for people to get involved, whatever your skill level is, right from kind of knowing nothing and point and click, building up a base of A for All-Stars through to, engineering on the protocol grants for different things. There'll be all sorts of ways that people can start to interact, and kind of we'd love to see an ecosystem of people working full-time on it. The whole point of this is that it's community-driven and DAO first, so the door's open to anyone to come in and start participating from the community's point of view and making those decisions. It's not something we're going to be kind of in charge of. Any significance to the number of tokens, 2,384,000,000 tokens? Yes, there is. David, that is an Easter egg.
We love Easter eggs. People who understand where the name of Altered State Machine comes from might match those two things up.
Yeah. Although they're random personalities, can you set it up so it's partially based on the traits? Like you get an idea that some look fun from what they're wearing, as I'd like my backstories to kind of semi-match, and I have set up the personality slightly based on the look. So the good thing about frames is they're clippable. So you just need to find a frame that fits the personality of your form, which is the visual representation, and then clip those two together, and then you've got a matching personality for your visual representation in the metaversal game.
Cool. So I'm relatively active on the Discord server and answering questions. So over the next couple of weeks, I will scan through these and pick out some to answer on the Ask Us Anything channel. And as
keep the questions coming.
Yeah, keep the questions coming. Cool.
Look out for some future like data releases as we kind of start to talk about the next ASM drops. Make sure that you're staying tuned for when those first packs are released. You definitely want to get a hold of one of those. And the ASM tokenomics will be released shortly as well, so there'll be more detail around that. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks guys.